Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're going to give everybody a couple of minutes to just filter in, and we will get started in about 2 minutes. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining our session this morning on how mobile startups can achieve growth through automated messaging and analytics. I'm Sam Graham. I work on the product and content marketing team here at Mixpanel, and I will be your MC today. Unfortunately, our speaker from Ragnarok had a last-minute emergency, so while I may not have Stephen's charisma and charm, I am still thrilled to be here. Before we get started, I'm just going to run through a couple of brief housekeeping items. The first of which is, if you have questions, we will be answering them at the end of the session in a dedicated Q&A. In the meantime, feel free to drop questions at any point in the Q&A widget in Zoom. You should see it at the bottom of your screen. And we will be recording the session, so don't feel like you need to take hurried notes. You can review it. We'll be sending it out in the next couple of days. And with that, I would love to introduce you to our speakers today. First, we have Ian Cruz.
Thanks, Sam. My name is Ian Cruz, Head of Partner Growth at Mixpanel, which is the leading product analytics tool in the space, where we help you track user behavior within your apps and your product. Today, I'll be walking through how simple it is to set up the integration between OneSignal and Mixpanel, and I'll pass it on to Nick.
Hey, everybody. My name is Nick Salzman. I lead global partnerships for OneSignal. OneSignal is one of the most widely used messaging platforms by startups looking to scale their mobile apps and websites. I'm excited to share a little bit more about our partnership, but also share how you can leverage OneSignal and Mixpanel to build your growth strategy. So excited to kind of dive into the platform, but also talk to you at a high level about how do you scale your business. So kind of starting off, why should you care about integrating your messaging and analytics tools? This is maybe a question that all of you are thinking about, but also, right, when is the right time to implement these tools? At what stage of growth should you be thinking about it? And why is this important? And when you're a startup, gaining an audience is a goal. You worked so hard to acquire each user, so it's critical that you really create a customer engagement loop to deliver timely and relevant messages to your audience. And to do this, you really want to think about, what things drive user engagement, and then create a touch point at every critical moment throughout their user journey. Second, you want to measure which messages drove certain results, like purchases or engagement, and then use that data to really inform your next engagement strategy and close that loop in the future. And it's actually really easy to get started and create this loop using Mixpanel and OneSignal. Our integration is easy to use, and both platforms scale for any size business. You can get started on a really small plan. You can scale up to a really large plan with complex functionality and advanced features. But we're trusted by thousands of companies across the industry. When you're looking at Mixpanel and OneSignal, we've also built a really easy to use integration that helps you scale and create this dynamic sync and kind of user journey. So as you can see, right, in Mixpanel, you may start off defining and creating sophisticated cohorts of users that do certain actions in your app. Maybe they are defined by certain characteristics. Then you can engage them dynamically via OneSignal because all of that user information syncs dynamically between both platforms. Then once you message those users, you can actually analyze their engagement rates with certain messages back in Mixpanel. So this really helps you close the loop and see, when should I engage those people? You engage them at the correct time, and then you can see the full funnel and where people drop off on the engagement path back in Mixpanel. It's a really powerful integration, and Ian's going to walk you through how to actually set this up later today. But before I kind of jump into that, I think it's important to take a step back and think about, how do you build a growth strategy from scratch? What are some light touch ways you can implement, the basics, but also grow to really implement a complex growth strategy to scale your business? So starting off with the basics, you really want to think about what are the common sense communications that acknowledge behavior and meaningfully direct valid action. These are usually, low level effort items, but really have a high ROI. And so we see most companies, start off and kind of implement some of these basic engagement practices. So a couple examples that are probably top of mind for most of us. First is an abandoned cart example. So here you'd want to, grow users and kind of add users to a specific cohort when they maybe intend to purchase, they've added something to their cart, but they don't actually complete that checkout flow. You want to drive those users to return to your app, complete that checkout, and really validate that they had an intent to purchase in the first place, and really drive that incremental revenue. This can easily be done by using Mixpanel to track users throughout their shopping journey, and then engaging them via OneSignal when you figure out that those people added something to their cart, but maybe didn't return and complete the purchase within an hour or 30 minutes, right? You want to engage them quickly, and that dynamic sync between Mixpanel and OneSignal is important to hit them before they've moved on to something else. The second example is, you've worked so hard to get people to download your app, and they've installed it, right? But maybe they haven't returned, and maybe they haven't returned since they first downloaded the app. They thought it was cool in the first place. You want to validate that those people actually are, going to be active users, and they didn't just download it because somebody said to do it and their first experience was bad. So you want to create a user cohort of everyone that downloads the app, but maybe hasn't returned more than once in their lifetime. And you want the action to be just a subtle nudge, right? Like return to the app, check out the new features, whatever it may be. And you want to validate, right, that you can actually increase your engagement and increase, the number of returning visitors that you have on a monthly and active basis. This is, really easy to set up, and another example of a basic engagement strategy that a lot of people set up when they first implement Mixpanel OneSignal, or they're just starting out, growing their mobile app or website. Next, you really want to think about how do you define your unique funnel strategy? And specifically, what behaviors are unique to your product, and how do you drive people along this conversion path from first downloading your app all the way to becoming a loyalist, right? Becoming a highly engaged user. Two common examples of kind of implementing your funnel strategy are product browsing and saving at-risk users. So kind of in the first example, maybe you have a hypothesis that people that browse 3 products convert really high and actually make a purchase within your app. But you see in Mixpanel, right, that the difference between browsing 2 products and browsing 3 products actually makes a significant difference on the conversion rate. And so you'd want to create a cohort of everybody that browsed 2 products but didn't purchase anything. And you want to create an engagement strategy that says, hey, check out this new product, right? One more product, so that they've actually browsed 3 products instead of 2 products. And you'd want to validate, right, that this would drive a higher conversion rate after 3 product browses, and that it's not just people browsing a couple different products, but it's actually that once they've touched a certain amount of products, which your threshold is 3, they convert better. And so that's really like thinking about your strategy from a top level down, and thinking about how do you engage people to really get more out of your product and then convert at a certain time period. The second example of thinking about your funnel strategy is saving at-risk users. This is one of the most important ones that we see from companies that we talk to across Mixpanel and OneSignal. You've worked so hard to bring these people into the funnel, and a lot of people talk about the activation and acquisition side of growing your user base, right? Like a top of funnel, you want to be really wide, but I think the best companies actually flip the funnel. They really think about, all right, once I actually have people that have downloaded the app, that have raised their hands, that have gone through that effort, how do we actually grow that user base, once people have downloaded the app and raised their hands? And how do we actually make sure that we turn everybody into an active user? And so one of the most common cohorts that kind of we see is creating a cohort of users who haven't returned the app in 7 days. And the action would just be something along the lines of like returning to the app. And it can be personalized for the specific audience that you're talking to, right? You can personalize the messaging via OneSignal. You can create multiple cohorts based off people's certain preferences or actions in the app. But you really, the main goal is return to the app, right? Return the app, create a better experience, have another touch point with us. And the validation that you want to check is, can you decrease churn if users are engaged on a weekly basis? So what you're basically doing is making sure that you engage users every week if they don't return to the app. And this is a really common engagement strategy that we see some of the best companies around implementing, right? They want to make sure that you have a weekly active user that is engaged, that is touching your product, and is experiencing everything that you have to offer. But these are some things that I see. Ian, what are the things that you see in terms of the funnel strategy that a lot of people are implementing at Mixpanel?
Yeah, I mean, these are definitely two of the top things here. A nudge to increase or improve that monetization funnel, right? Or resurrecting those dormant users, all of which are possible with this integration. But on the flip side, the other two things I've seen is rewarding your power users, right? Maybe you send something that rewards your power users, some sort of promo for them. And the other side is also, if you launch a new feature, how do you showcase that? Who do you showcase it to? You can build a cohort to make sure you're pushing that towards your users who you think would be utilizing that new feature. So those are two other common ones I've seen in addition to these.
Yeah, those are also great as well. And then lastly, right, once you've actually set your baseline, once you've set your funnel strategy, how do you create personalized user experiences at scale? Maybe it's easy to create this when you're just getting started, but as you scale your business, you got to realize that your user base is pretty large. You have different types of users, different segments, and how do you create personalized experiences for different cohorts or groups of them, and really drive increased personalization and revenue from that. So here's an example that we came up with that I think we see a decent amount. This example is for a media app that offers premium sports content through a subscription, right? And the example would be you want to create a conversion funnel that drives people to a free trial and then drives them to actually purchase a premium subscription. So your beginning user cohort would be maybe people that view certain article categories every week, but are not on a premium subscription. You offer a certain amount of articles that people can view without upgrading to that premium content. And you want to be able to track which articles people are viewing, right? So maybe you track that Ian's a big sports fan and he's a 49ers fan. So he watches a lot of content related to that on a weekly basis. So you can tag Ian as a 49ers fan, and you can also start tracking that he views maybe 1 to 2 articles a week. You want to send a personalized message to Ian and all the people like him with breaking news, right? That's contextual to that user's preferences. So you want to send him, specific sports content related to the 49ers, maybe the draft's coming up in a week. So you want to make sure that he's seeing all the breaking news and highlights. And that causes Ian to engage more. He's now part of this more engaged cohort that you've created after you sent some personalized messages. So now these people are a group of users that have actually, stepped up their engagement because you're sending them more personalized content. And then once you got them to engage with your content more and engage with your product more, you can now send them a second message to really nudge them to sign up for a free trial of your premium content. And you want to validate that basically we can take a cohort of users, we can see what they're interested in, we can drive them to really create personalized experiences with our product because we can use OneSignal to send them personalized messages based off their interest. And then from there, we can re-engage the people that are seeing increased traction with our content, the people that are coming to the app more, and we can drive them to a trial that we think will convert to a higher, subscription in the future. And we want to validate, right, that higher engagement will actually increase our subscription revenue. So this is just one example of the many personalized experiences that people are setting up using Mixpanel, OneSignal. We see these across every industry, from media to technology, e-commerce, food and beverage. It really, doesn't stop with just startups either. It can scale for any size business. But with that, I'll kind of pass it over to Ian to jump into the demo and show you, how does this actually work?
Thanks, Nick. Let me steal the screen. And just as a quick recap, right? Mixpanel helps track those events and properties, which are the user behaviors and the attributes about those behaviors, which then allows you to then create cohorts out of those behaviors and send them into OneSignal, where then you can design and automate those messages on a recurring basis or a one-time basis. So the first step, right? Maybe you're a startup, you're strapped for time. This integration is actually fairly simple to set up between the two. So the first step to get the data out of Mixpanel, the cohorts out of Mixpanel and into OneSignal, is to first get these keys and IDs within the settings in OneSignal. So once you pull that, you go into your Mixpanel project, right? Jump into the integrations, and then find OneSignal under our integrations library. And from there, it's already connected, but if I were to disconnect and reconnect, it would ask for that key where you then plug in and it will activate the integration. So once that's activated, you're then free to create those cohorts. So if I go to users and I've already pre-built this cohort, we're at a fintech app where it's basically a banking app with additional features. Think online banking and Robinhood and Acorns combined, right? So in this case, I'm looking at users who logged in the last 7 days. So they're fairly active. They're like kind of power users, right? And then I'm looking at anyone who added to savings at any point in the last year. And in addition to that, I want them to have added to savings more than 5 times or 5 or more times. And when I can create this hyper-targeted and granular cohort here, which then yielded me these users, right, that I'm listed here. So once I've saved this cohort, I can jump to our cohort section. And from there, I will see this cohort that I've created and saved. And if I go, since I've already activated that cohort sync, I can click this button and I can export this to OneSignal, right? When I start a new export, I'm essentially allowed to do 2 types of exports, a one-time export or a dynamic sync. A one-time export will just send it one time. A dynamic sync will sync actually every 15 minutes, which is the fastest sync we have with any of our messaging partners. So that allows for that nice real-time automated messages to go out fairly quickly to your users. So once that sync is enabled and created, all of these cohorts will show up within the segments section of the audience in OneSignal, right? So all of these cohorts show up, and from there, you can send any of these cohorts messages via any of the channels that OneSignal provides, and that's email, push, one app, SMS. And so all of these cohorts are here, and you can touch them or nudge them through any of those channels. And once you have these cohorts these hyper-targeted cohorts, you can then set up these automated message. And when you go to automated message, you go to messages, you automate it, click the automated section, and I can create an engagement campaign here. So I had that Power Savers cohort, right? And I'm trying to show them that we have this new retirement plan feature that we're trying to get them to sign up for, link an account to. So let's do that as our Q1 engagement campaign. And this is where you can then select that segment, right? It defaults to subscribed users, but I can select our Power Savers here. And then I can I've pre-built a template or create a new template. I've pre-built one for push notification in this case. And here I'm just saying to our Power Savers, earn more in our new retirement plan, and a nice little power up in an image here. We have a delivery schedule you can do. So you can do immediately as soon as they qualify in the cohort, intelligent delivery, or a custom time per user time zone. So I can make that active. And now this is sending out messages, sending out these push notifications to these Power Savers. And the next step is I want to analyze, did this lead to our users, our Power Savers actually converting or engaging and linking an account? So the next step then is, now that we have data out from Mixpanel to OneSignal, we want to get data in from OneSignal into Mixpanel. So similar to that first step where we use an API key, we just take the project token from Mixpanel's project settings, and then go back into OneSignal under settings, analytics. You can see Mixpanel is here as a provider and integrator, and you plug it in here where you can then save it. And once it's saved, this data can then send. So you're thinking message sends, app opens from pushes, unsubscribes, things like that related to the messaging events that are happening here. And once all that data gets sent out into Mixpanel, you can create a dashboard like this, right? An engagement dashboard. You can get the messages sent per message, the app open from push per different types of push. You can see, did a specific message lead to a login? But in this specific case, we have a funnel where we want to see, did that message lead to users linking an account for the retirement plan, right? So if I jump into that funnel, it's pretty straightforward to set up this funnel. You select the event, in this case, message sent, and we want to see the specific message that we sent. So in this case, I'm filtering for the message, which is the Q1 engagement campaign. And then as simple as that, the next event is just, did they link that account? And let's give them 1 day to convert from when they're sent a message. Maybe that's a little generous. Maybe we want to expand that time period because people don't just link accounts or retirement accounts in the day of. So that's something you could play around with. But you can see that there's a 26% conversion rate. And you can also analyze, is 1 day quick enough or long enough? It looks like the median time is 20 minutes. So that's pretty nice to see. Another thing you can also do, I know we didn't have specific variants that were included in the message, but if there were variants included, you can break down and see, which variant led to the most account links and measure which one won. So I can select the variant, and basically variant A in this case of the message led to the most conversions, and we can say, let's stick to that kind of messaging for our Power Savers in the future. And you can remove the other variants as you're analyzing it. So this is just one of many examples you can do within Mixpanel and combining that with OneSignal, OneSignal's messaging capabilities. But as you can see, it's pretty quick and pretty simple to set up the integration. But I'll pass it on to Sam for any questions that you guys may have.
Great, thanks, Ian. Now we're going to move into the Q&A session. Feel free to drop your questions as they come up. I'll start us off with this one, which is, how long does it take for Mixpanel and OneSignal to communicate back and forth with each other? Does this happen in real time?
I could take that. That's a great question. It didn't really show on the modal when I was linking that cohort, but the dynamic sync is every 15 minutes. So every 15 minutes, there's essentially a check to see if someone is in the cohort or out of the cohort, and that gets synced directly with OneSignal within the segment section of the audience.
Great. That was the only question I received so far. Oh, there's another one that came in through the chat. If you have a list from a database query, can you import it as a cohort?
Yeah, so yes, you can. There is an import function, and I can share my screen really quickly. Within users section, you can import or update profiles. So you can import those lists of profiles via CSV. There are a few things to keep in mind. There are certain IDs needed in both platforms for them to sync. So those will have to be generated and included. And also, if you're sending them an email, that's just, you want to like avoid the traps of running into email spam traps and all that. So make sure that these are users who have actually subscribed and not unsubscribed from your platform. So those are just some gotchas to keep in mind. But Nick, maybe you have some better practices and strategies around that.
Yeah, the one thing that I would add is that we have a pretty strong integration that allows you to sync users between both platforms through an external ID. So this could be an ID that you have in your database that doesn't live in OneSignal or Mixpanel, or maybe it does already. So it's easy to actually use a database query of users that have certain joint IDs and save those both in Mixpanel and OneSignal. So a lot of our customers really like this if they want to actually link users based off some database ID instead of an ID stored specifically to Mixpanel or specifically to OneSignal. And that's a pretty unique part of our integration because we work with really large companies where they have a lot of data in their database and they really want to leverage that to create these cohorts and sync them to OneSignal. And so that's a common practice that we've seen. And that will work across any channel that we kind of message on the OneSignal side.
Great. We have some more questions coming in. Joseph asks, is this integration available at all OneSignal pricing tiers?
So this integration is available for all paid customers of OneSignal. So we have basically a free tier, a growth, a pro and enterprise tiers. And so this integration, along with some of our other integrations, is available once you start paying at a bare minimum for the platform. The good news is we have a really easy to use growth tier that has a ton of functionality and starts at $9 a month. So really, any stage business can get started and see value really quickly, leveraging the integration and getting started kind of at that growth level tier if you're worried about cost.
Great, thanks, Nick. Next question, can you show a funnel and how it breaks down across multiple cohorts? For example, if you have savers, spenders, is it possible to compare the funnel results for multiple cohorts at the same time in the same report?
Yeah, you absolutely can. And I can kind of share my screen again really quickly here. But I created a quick funnel here, just login and account linked. I know we're not including any messaging events because technically I sent all the messages to the power savers alone. But in the breakdown section, you can select as many cohorts as you can. So I can create another cohort here. Users who just did an event. Let's just keep it simple for now. Test. And now I'm breaking it down by 2 cohorts and measuring the conversion between those who are in each of them and not in each of them. So then you can measure the conversion in those and see the each cohort converting through.
Thanks, Ian. Fernando asks, how do you define chains of messages, e.g. email A plus push A plus in-app A?
Yeah, I can kind of start this and then Ian, maybe you want to finish it. But basically, you can define all the different messages that we send. And we actually send all the properties of each message. So at a user level, the data that we're flowing back into Mixpanel is that each user received a single message from a specific channel and what was their action, right? Did they open? Did they click? Did they perform some messaging event? And so all that data flows back into Mixpanel, so that you can analyze, all the different messages that you're sending throughout, your touch point or user journeys that you're creating. So all that data will be used in Mixpanel, and it's on a user granular and your level.
Cool. Our next question comes from Valerie. Can you tag users with their survey answers from in-app messages and have that data in Mixpanel?
Yes, so good question. You can tag users pretty easily using OneSignal's in-app messaging capability. And I could show you that on a different time, but basically you would set up a survey, right? Maybe you set up an NPS survey, whatever you want. You add multiple different buttons to your in-app message, and you can automatically tag users in OneSignal with certain, in-app message, answers that they've given you, right? So maybe you have a 0 to 5 scale, and whatever somebody clicks, you kind of add that user via OneSignal tag. That data can flow back into Mixpanel, but you would have to do that via our API. That's not a specific like messaging event that we're tracking as an outcome. That's a specific like user tag that we would have in OneSignal, but that's possible to transfer to Mixpanel via our API.
Great. I have a follow-up question from Fernando, who had asked about defining the chains of messages. Fernando then asks, but then how do I trigger the next event or the next message? So if email A goes first, and if I opened, then push A, and if not opened, push B, do I create cohorts for each of these cases?
So good question. That can all be done actually within OneSignal. So you wouldn't actually have to send the message, have it go back into Mixpanel, create a cohort, and then re-engage them via OneSignal. OneSignal has retargeting capabilities where you can actually create a cohort, send them a message, and then retarget groups of users that your exact example, either open the message, didn't open the message, created some action. You can then create a new segment directly in OneSignal to retarget users and create the next step in their funnel. So that's fully possible within OneSignal. So you don't have to actually go back and forth between Mixpanel and OneSignal at that point.
Great. So our next question comes from Harsh. He asks, I've often seen some apps blast me with more notifications when I don't engage with them, and then others that only send me notifications when I'm not using the app instead of bringing me in with interesting content. There's definitely a healthy medium, but how would you advise making sure that I'm engaging the right people at the right time?
Yeah, I can start and Ian jump in. I think what's really important, and I think this is why we're here and talking about the beauty of using a messaging and analytics product, is that most companies maybe are starting with some baseline messaging, right, to re-engage their users. And like you said, right, people have different, hypotheses. Maybe they want to like hit people up with tons of messages to get them to return to their app. Or maybe some people have a better strategy to send really contextual messages. But the beauty of using messaging and analytics combined is that you're not just sending messages and seeing some results. You're actually able to create specific groups of users in Mixpanel and be able to analyze and improve your messaging campaigns, right? So if you see that certain people aren't responding, you can adjust your strategy. If you see that people are more responsive after 5 days or more responsive every day, those are things that you can actively be tracking in Mixpanel, and you can be iterating on your engagement strategy. And so when we talk about that loop, right, it's really important to think about your holistic journey and closing the loop between the analytics that you're seeing and the strategy that then you deploy via a messaging tool like OneSignal. And so the value of getting started today with implementing that type of strategy and using both tools is that you don't, overuse your users. You don't start off at the very beginning just blasting people with messages to return to the app, but you actually create, those 3 steps, right? You create the basics, right? You create the basic engagements, then you iterate, then you see, what's working, what isn't, how do we create like more full funnel engagements, and then you create personalized touch points out of your most engaged users. So thinking about that full loop is really important for, companies that are just getting started. And I think like that's the reason why we kind of created the session, was to really illustrate that it's never too early to get started. You should always think about like, how do you implement this from the very beginning? Because you want to create a great experience, and your early users are really important to make sure that you don't burn them out with too many messages or not contextual messages.
Awesome. Ian, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, Nick, you're spot on. It's about closing the loop and iterating on the loop. So yeah, you're already sending these targeted messages based off these events and properties. And then maybe the first time you send those messages, oh, we sent these way too frequent to these group of users, and we're seeing very low conversion rates, all of which you can only see with an integration between these two. So then maybe next time you send it, you have a different strategy in how you're engaging these users and how often you are. So then you basically are making these data-driven actions, and you're iterating on that strategy based off of these things. So yeah, Nick, you're spot on there.
Great. Well, I'll give folks a couple more seconds to see if any other questions come in. Oh, here is one right now. Let's see. Is it possible to trigger a different in-app message based on a push notification or email message?
So I think I'll take this one. So I think the question is, can you trigger a different message to a group of users based off of certain action they took in your in-app message? I think that's what you're getting at. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that's totally possible within just OneSignal itself. What you're actually able to do is create groups of users via what I went over earlier, which were tags. So basically, you can send custom in-app messages via OneSignal, depending on certain actions that users take, whether they click certain buttons in a survey, whether they tell you certain categories that they're interested in, maybe they make a purchase from the in-app message, whatever they do, you can start tagging those users in OneSignal directly with those results. And then basically you would create a segment in OneSignal that includes everybody based off those certain tags, right? So everybody that did some action in your in-app message, you then create a segment of those users, and then you'd be able to send a push notification or an email to that segmented group of users. So fully possible and to create a multi-touch journey where you are seeing user results and categorizing them based off different actions, and then sending them different messages, whether it's a push or email or whatever it may be, through OneSignal.
Great. Well, unless we get any more questions in the next couple of minutes, I'd say that is probably it for us, and we're coming up on time anyway. Oh, one more. All right, we'll call this one the last one. What kind of custom data can I use in messages in OneSignal? Does it have to be a user property?
I can take this one. So when I was creating that cohort earlier of the power savers, that was based off events happening, but you can also use properties on those events and user properties. So a combination of all those things can be done to cohortize your group. So not just the user property level, but also the action-based event level can be used.
Well, we hope we answered everybody's questions. We'll be sending a follow-up shortly with the recording and some additional resources, as well as a voucher for Uber Eats. We want to thank you for coming today, and would love to treat you to lunch. Thanks everyone for joining. Take care.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Pleasure.
Have a good one.